ready to kick off again. Great, Nathan's restarted the recording. Thank you, Nathan. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a bit of a break, some nice lunch, and we're ready to restart. For anybody who just missed it, my Teams has gone a little bit rogue, so I can't switch my camera back on. So we'll just carry on like this. You could all remember my face anyway, so it's fine. Right, we are on item number 9, I believe. So this is where we look at our corporate risk register. You've got the papers there, but I'm going to invite Boyd to speak to this item and take us through the updates. So over to you, Boyd, if you're there.
I am here. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah. And we have a standard report, corporate risk register. I'm just going to just try and get my screen so I can read from it. But the board is asked to take substantial assurance on the updated risk register, which is an extract from Datix, and has been checked across our execs, and each risk has come through the relevant governance committee and executive oversight before being added in Datix and then updated into this paper. Grateful to colleagues who've helped compile this report from the strategy and transformation team. And we'll note that as well as some of the risk updates and risk removals where risks have been replaced with one relevant to the new financial year. We also have an addition of one in Clinical Governance Committee, which is about sustainability, which was mentioned earlier in the meeting. So with that very brief introduction today, I wonder, Chair, if the right thing to do is to allow any questions on the latest version of our standard risk report, and I would look to my executive colleagues to come in if any questions pertain to a risk that is within their domain.
That's great. Thank you, Boyd. Yeah, that sounds like a good approach. So thanks for giving us the update with those closed and refreshed risks. So let's open up questions, comments, anything that people want to pick up on the risk register. I wonder actually if I could ask a question about, I'm sorry, I'm just struggling to find the page. Just that point around, well, it was about the sustainability risk that you just talked about there, Boyd, the new risk. And I think, you know, that's absolutely the right thing to do, to have that articulated in there. Do we, and this is slightly random, but I'm just interested, it made me think about the way that other boards articulate their kind of strategic risks at this level. And I don't know if we've ever looked across the way at other boards and what they, and the way that they articulate those kind of risks, and if that's something that might be helpful.
I'm happy to answer that, Chair. So I certainly, and those that support me with risk, have done that exercise. We particularly did it when we were developing the risk appetite. And one of the ways to look at that was we were looking to see how we would marry up risk appetite stated per the Good Governance Guide with the way that the corporate risk register was stated. And we were looking at risk appetite statements in other boards and looking at their risk registers for the boards as well. And so looking across, I think the first thing to say is that in NHS Scotland's, especially territorial boards, there is quite a variation in how risks are expressed and in what topics find their way into corporate level risks as opposed to the more operational risk registers, which of course also exist and in some cases feed up to strategic and some in many cases don't. And so it's difficult, therefore, to see a common thread that would mean that we would try to be the same as most of the other boards, because there isn't that average position. We have therefore taken note of what other boards have done and looked for best practice and for ways to learn from what they've done. But we've crafted our risk register as much as possible around the elements of Together We Care, as well as certain elements of, I guess, some of the modern risks that we will carry, like cyber, where actually that's linked not so much to our strategy as it's linked to a sign of the times and the kind of external factors that can come into play for any organization. So we've therefore, as always, got what you could call a hybrid effort as a result, but in practice, as much as possible, linked to our governance committee's outlook and linking that as much as possible to our strategy. So it remains a strategic risk register rather than an operational risk register or an issues log, each of which would be different. So there's no right answer, but we've crafted it in an evolutionary fashion with most of you on the journey to as we've done that and full engagement to the latest version. And as I've itemized recently, we will look to map our board risk appetite measures into our existing risks in the future so that you get an easier document to read and one that perhaps allows a different kind of assessment in the likes of board meetings.
Okay, now that's really, really helpful. Thank you, Boyd. And can I just pick up on one specific one? And I don't know, I'm either missing something or we might have a bit of a copy and paste error. On risk number, I think it's 1182. So the New Craig's PFI transfer, I'm not sure if I'm getting the wrong end of the stick there, but I'm just conscious, obviously, we had the update earlier about the transfer across. Is that one that we'd be looking to close? Oh, look, Richard's going to come in. Go on, Richard.
Yeah, so we're keeping the programme board going for 3 more meetings, and Helen and myself thought we'd be better off keeping the risk open until we do that quarter review, and then the intention would be to take a closure report back through FRP at that point.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you, Richard. Great. Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding the risk register? Boyd?
Yeah, again, and there may be other hands will come up, but I suppose the reminder for all of us, as always, is that risk can be a good thing because risk informs behaviours or interventions or actions that reduce risk and therefore make success more likely. So risk isn't about the stuff that goes wrong or has gone wrong. It's about maximizing the chances of getting things right and taking actions and putting in controls to limit the chances of things not going so well. So risk management and active risk processes, including mitigations, are very much part of best practice. And I believe that the board is working well in this area. There's always more to do, but that is the approach that we are taking.
No, that's good. Thanks, Boyd. And I think that point there about the always more to do, I think is a good one. I think absolutely about keeping it live and keeping sighted on it is really important. We can't just create the risk register and then file it away. So I think it's right that we keep a fresh perspective on it. Jerry, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to have a discussion, if I could, about the proposed new risk in relation to sustainability of services and why we feel we need to add another risk onto our risk register when we've already got 1097, which is about the need to change in order to deliver sustainable services, and we've already got a staff governance risk about inability to recruit staff of the sufficient capability, capacity, etc., etc. So I just wonder why we need another parsing of those sort of themes. I'm not saying I don't agree with it. I just like to understand the logic.
I'll attempt to answer that, Chair, if that's okay. The first thing to say is that that particular risk has come through the Clinical Governance Committee, and being the committee that oversees clinical quality and safety, particularly, it is a recurring area of concern, both for those in the committee and those that feed into the meetings that feed up to it. So effectively, a very large number of our clinical workforce. And while there are other sustainability issues, those pertaining to clinical services and the risks that are therefore present if you are unable to sustain all of the services that you would want clinically, for a whole variety of reasons, then that is a very strong concern for our clinical workforce, which is a large part of NHS Highland. So the Clinical Governance Committee is actively looking at sustainability through the quality and safety lens. And therefore while it may be registered elsewhere, quality and safety are particularly the focus in that governance committee, and the importance of the lens for our clinical workforce to see that the Clinical Governance Committee is actively doing what it can to oversee and to advise on how those risks are managed and how those risks are seen, I can't understate the importance of that lens, that visibility for our workforce of it. So I think it will, while it's a new risk in terms of being present and stated, it's a long-standing risk in terms of some of the activity of the Clinical Governance Committee, and with some particularly hot items. We mentioned vascular, but we have quite a number others listed in the paper. We have many areas that colleagues are working on very actively in order to sustain our services, and some strategic thought about what the future will look like as well, given our current market forces and other demographic and workforce factors that affect our ability to recruit and sustain.
Thanks, Boyd, and thanks, Jerry. I think great question, but I think, yeah, Boyd, you've explained that well. Thank you. Okay, I am not seeing any other hands up. So let's just recap here. So we were being asked to note the content.
Karen.
Thanks. Karen, go on.
Sorry, Fiona. I might be wrong, but I just think Jerry was doing a bit of that there. And I would say from the perspective,
you were not wrong.
I was not wrong. I read your body language there, and I thought you're not quite finished with that conversation. And I think, again, this is a discussion that we had with the leads for clinical governance, the executive leads. And I think it is about that, and it might be that we need to perhaps go back and reframe slightly that statement, that risk narrative, because in my view, it's about that professional accountability, and it's from the perspective of the clinicians and the social care professionals that we have under our areas of responsibility across the system that the exec leads have responsibility for. And so it is more nuanced, I would say, than the other statements, which are more general. And I think that's where maybe we need to just slightly tweak that from the perspective of that. It's a clinical.
I get exactly what you're saying, Karen, yeah. But I suppose what I would say is I don't, and maybe that's what you're saying, I don't think that's what's reflected in that narrative at the moment, that nuance. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean,
yeah.
If Boyd and Louise are happy with that, we can have another stab at just getting that right, because I think it's right that we have it. I completely agree that we need it to have it there, and I think it's right that it sits as part of clinical governance, because it is about the clinical and social care accountability question, and that the professional oversight by the professions, the registered professionals who are all involved in that. So that's the bit I think that's different to that kind of the other risk where it talks about sustainability, workforce planning, and all those things. So I think it is about just nailing that narrative term maybe a little bit. We can maybe just add that a little bit into that, if that makes sense to others. Am I getting a nod now?
Thanks for picking that up, Karen, and apologies, I've got a wild delay between my visual and my sound. So Karen's image on my screen is still saying what she was saying about 3 minutes ago. That sounds fine. So just to recap then, so if you are happy, guys, to take that offline and have another look at that wording just to reflect that. But I can't see nods really, so people are going to have to say
Yes.
is that okay? Thank you. Thank you. I am seeing a visual, but it's really not anywhere near the sound. Okay, now that's helpful. Thank you. Good. And I'm assuming that my hands up thing is still working. I can't see any other hands up. So we can take that away as an action with regards to that one specific item. Other than that particular action, are we happy with the rest of it and happy to take substantial assurance? I need an audio, sorry.
Yeah, everyone's okay with that, Sarah.
Thank you. Right, do you know what? I'm just going to try something and see if my image will catch up. In the meantime, so thank you, Boyd, for taking us through that. That takes us on to item number 10. So this is our Q4 whistleblowing report, which will then be followed by our annual report. But Gareth, if you want to take us through the Q4 report first, that'd be great.
No problem at all. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I can't
Yeah,
see you okay, but I can hear you.
Okay, so this is our standard quarterly report covering the period. I've just realised it's got a typo in there. That should be 30th of March 2025, so apologies for that. It's the last quarter of last financial year. One concern was received during that period. One case was still open and under investigation, and in WoW closed one case review and one case review remained open. So there's a little bit of detail there. The concern received was under some discussion in relation to where the best way to approach that, with some discussion around whether counter fraud would be involved, but they've confirmed that there would be no criminal aspect to this. So we're looking at it at the moment from potentially from an HR perspective. So there's a few things just to work through there as to whether it sits under whistleblowing or not. So we're working with the whistleblower in that space to discuss that. And the others, I'll just take the rest of it as read. In terms of the INWO, just mostly related to looking at current cases, previous cases, and just a few queries. One of them was closed down, and the other one has subsequently been closed since this report was written. So they've been progressed onwards. So the report is asking for moderate assurance. Again, stays on that basis of the working days, 20 working days still being a challenge for us to meet. And as I say, in the appendix, there is an update on previous cases, and the review of where actions have got to. So again, you can see progress against those, which is positive to see. So I'll stop there.
That's great. Thank you, Gareth. Do we have any questions or comments on the Q4 report? Obviously, we're going to have the annual one as well, but happy if there's anything we want to pick up specifically against this quarter. No, okay, I'm not seeing any hands up, so we are being asked to note the content of the report and take moderate assurance. Oh, sorry, is someone coming in? Oh, no.
No.
Okay, so we're being asked to take moderate assurance from that, but noting the challenges of meeting those the 20 working days within the standards. I'll assume everybody's okay with that. And then we segue beautifully into our annual report. So Gareth has quite a lot of you this afternoon.
I know.
So it's back to you, Gareth.
I've got a couple of tea to keep me going. This is our annual report. It should be produced with this close to the within 3 months of the end of the financial year, but obviously it needs to sit in line with our governance cycle. So we will submit this report following approval today if we approve this report as a board. It follows a set format that's laid out by INWO in terms of the key performance indicators and the approach to structuring the report. Just that there is a lot of information in the report, so I won't go into too much detail. Just colleagues will have had a chance to read it. Just pull out some key highlights from the report. There've been a small number of cases, again, submitted within the last financial year. We continue to get around about 180 to 200 contacts via our confidential contacts, which is provided by the Guardian Service, and this may be one of the reasons why, in the form of early resolution, some concerns are dealt with in that way. It is difficult to extrapolate wider learning from the small number of cases. We've given a brief description in the report of the cases from last year and the learning from those. So again, there's some common themes there which are highlighted in the report itself, which align well with strategic work we're doing as an organisation to address some of those issues. So I'll stop there because, as I say, it gives space for any questions in relation to the report. But asking for substantial approval of substantial assurance based on the requirement to produce a report for the board and the annual report against the requirements from INWO.
Thanks, Gareth. I found this report really, really helpful. I think, and we started it a while ago, but I think that sort of summary table and the themes that come out of that is really helpful. I know we need to be cautious because they are low numbers, and so we obviously need to be careful about making some assumptions around data. But I think the way that that's been presented has certainly been helpful. I'm happy to open up for questions or comments. I mean, I suppose I would like to invite Bert if Bert has anything he wants to add, and I think it would be worth at this point noting the sustained effort that Bert puts in to his whistleblowing role, and how active Bert is in getting out and about and meeting people, and I know that is certainly appreciated. And I think as a board we should note that and commend it and thank Bert for his work. But I don't know, Bert, if you wanted to add a comment at this point about the annual report.
Thank you, Chair, for your kind remarks. I think Gareth has covered everything that we need to be saying, really. I've nothing to add to that. I think he makes the valid observation in relation to the small numbers that there are many routes that people can use to raise concerns, and whistleblowing is only one route, and indeed may be the last option that people would consider using. We would never want to stifle people coming forward to raise concerns, and I think the number of options that are there demonstrates the willingness of the organisation to offer up these different opportunities. The numbers are low. The numbers are consistently low. I guess you can draw from that whatever you want to draw from it. But as I've said earlier, and indeed as Gareth said, there are a number of routes that people can use, and we know that people do use these routes. The time factor for completing investigations, we don't comply with the standards in regard to that, but I think there's justifiable reasons, a justifiable explanation for that. And I think the important thing is that anyone who raises a concern, if the timelines are not being adhered to, then they are kept up to date with where we are with things, and that there's regular communication. And I know that happens. So other than that, Chair, I've nothing to add. Thank you.
No, that's helpful, thanks. But can I actually just ask a question about that? The 20-day, and I think we might have spoken about this before, but this has brought it back into focus for me. I've heard other boards struggle with those targets as well. We are not we're not unique in that, and I don't know, and maybe Bert knows this, or maybe Gareth, if there have been conversations about how realistic those targets are, if if everybody's struggling with them, are they realistic? And yes, of course we should strive for speedy resolution, but I suppose if those targets are impossible to meet most of the time by most of the people, is it sort of a useful one? I don't know, but I'll bring you back in.
Thank you, Chair. This is not unique to NHS Highland, and indeed there have been national conversations about this, about the difficulty in complying with these timelines. The standards talk about 5 working days for level 1, 20 working days for level 2. If it's a level 2 concern, then it's very likely to be a complicated or potentially drawn out investigation. And then when you consider that there might be a number of individuals who have to be interviewed, annual leave, people working shifts, all of these other factors come into play. So to go back to your question, are the timelines realistic? My personal view is that in most of the cases, they are not realistic. There have been conversations, as I've said, at a national level through the INWO, but these are the timelines that we are having to work to. And provided we can demonstrate the efforts that we've made to comply with the timelines and keep up the communication line that I referred to earlier, and I think that's the most that we can do at this time. Chair, thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Bert. And Gareth, did you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, just to say that under the KPI number 8, which covers the work at the timescales, I've put some commentary in there in terms of some of the, again, building on Bert's points. I think one of the aspects that's so those timescales are drawn from the model complaints handling process as a mirror of that. I suppose the key difference is the confidential aspect of the investigations, which can be quite difficult to undertake and difficult to coordinate in that context. So that's one aspect. So just the practicalities of keeping it confidential. There is also an awful lot of information generated from these cases to look at and analyse and draw some conclusions from. And it is good practice to meet with the individuals as well. So I've put these in to agree, where possible, to agree with them, the report and the outcomes recommendations. So we do take time to do that. So I put it into the report in the hope, I think, that then gets picked up as part of, because this will go to INWO, that they will see some of these comments in the reports and pick that up. But again, I think it would require legislative change for them to look at the timescales. So whether there's appetite to do that or not, I don't know.
Okay, right. Okay, now that's helpful to understand. Emily, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you. Gareth, just one minor point around KPI 2, the INWO case reviews. It refers to 23-24. I just wasn't sure. Does it genuinely take that long for something to work through the process, or is that a stray reference from a previous year's report?
Just let me have a look. I will double check that. We do have, yeah. KPI 2, sorry, just finding the place. Bear with me a minute.
Just the final paragraph of that section.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll need to update that. So thanks for identifying that all.
And sorry, I did have another question just around, I guess this is one for yourself and also for my wider board colleagues, but on the visibility of leaders point that comes out later in the report, how do you think that we as a board can do better on this?
So we are there is an action plan associated with the deep dive that we did last year, and that the data and the tables has come from that survey in terms of what people want to see. So it's understanding that question a bit more. So we are looking at, and with Dominic coming in, it's one of the things I've asked him to look at is how we organise our visits, and so we get the spread. So that is a key thing. That was one that came back in terms of being present and being in person. And there's some comments there about vlogs as well. We're reviewing how we do some of these things as well. So I think it's one of these things that's never done, and you just have to keep looking at and pushing ourselves to see how we might do things differently. And Nikki coming in as a new head of comms and engagement is also having a look at how we approach this going forwards as well. So we may get some new ideas in relation to staff engagement generally.
Okay, thank you. And Jerry, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Gareth, I think I might have asked this question at last year's annual report, and I suspect the answer is probably not any different this year. Do we have any intelligence as to whether the INWO is actually going to produce an overarching report for NHS Scotland at some point? Maybe not an annual report, but a lessons learned now that we're so long a bit further into the process? Or is the nature of these, the only thing they've got in common is the title?
There has been, so easy answer is there's been no indication that INWO would do that. I think my observations would be that they also struggle with timescales and capacity. So I think that's factual in terms of when we've got case reviews. They do take some time to come back with them. So I do think the complexity, so I think their time and capacity is used up a lot with the actual current process. That might be a factor. And I also think it might very well be difficult to actually draw a number of things together from those different reports. But it would maybe be helpful if they took time to do that, but there's been no indication of that.
It's a really good question, though, isn't it? And I wonder actually, but you can maybe tell me a little bit more about. I know there is a network of whistleblowing champions, and that you work together across the boards, and of course you yourself are a whistleblowing champion for 2 boards. And whilst I'm not proposing that the whistleblowing champions or the network of champions would take it upon themselves to create such a report that Jerry has asked for, but I suppose what I'm looking for is just to understand if in that coming together of whistleblowing champions, there is the opportunity to exchange information that, fair enough, wouldn't be as kind of structured and comprehensive as a report that Jerry is proposing would be helpful, but maybe in a less formal way. I don't know. I mean, I'll bring Bert in. Gareth, did you want to add to that before I bring Bert in?
Yeah, just to say that we have a whistleblowers practitioners forum as well, which we also meet with. We meet with INWO, so we do provide feedback through that, and the boards do come together to share experiences in that space. And I have struggled somewhat to they always seem to clash for something I've not been able to get to. So Dominic will be going to them going forwards, so that's going to be quite helpful. And INWO also then get feedback on some of the things that are coming out around probably the process. I don't want to go too much further in the board session to explain going into depth, but it's just to provide assurance we can provide feedback, and it would be fair to say that there's not all of that feedback is positive for INWO at the moment from boards. So there's just some challenges there which we do put back. So we have that line of communication, and I think it's important that we maintain relationships with INWO as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bert, I'll bring you in for the closing remarks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You're right in what you say. There is a network of whistleblowing champions that meets informally, but also I think it's once a year meets with the INWO where there's an opportunity to share information. From that, there is not what I might describe as an annual report provided by the INWO, either taking account of the interaction with the champions or with officials. But what is also done on an annual basis is the whistleblowing champion is required to report to government via the INWO, and there is an acknowledgement comes back to me on an individual basis in relation to what I have written in the report. And if there is anything that I need to take forward from that, then I will, and I'll share it appropriately. But in relation to some formal annual report, which I think Jerry was referring to, then there is nothing as far as I'm aware. Thank you.
Okay, no, that's helpful, thank you. And as I was recognising the comments there that you made to Gareth about their own challenges with capacity, but you know, it is a great idea. So we can mention it from time to time in appropriate circles. Okay, thank you. I think that was really helpful. We are being asked to note the content of the annual report and take substantial assurance based on the content and format of that. Sorry, I just forgot. I was one other point I was going to make. It's a tiny thing, which is maybe to be picked up in next year's report, and it's just around language. There's a few times where it refers to the health board, which I know is what we call health, NHS organisations in Scotland, but in some of the bits, in some of the wording, I think it can be a little bit misleading because it sounds like it's the board of NHS Highland as opposed to NHS Highland, the organisation. And it's a small point around language, but I think, one thing we know from feedback is that people are not always absolutely clear on the roles and responsibility of the board, us as a group here today versus other bits of the organisation. So it's just maybe something to take into consideration for the future reports. Okay, so that moves us on now to item number 12. This is the Health and Care Staffing Act for Q4. Gareth.
Okay, so we've described this as an addendum to cover off the last quarter of the year, noting that the full annual report was seen by the board relatively recently, and the reporting times for that mean that it effectively gets reported to the board through Q3. So this is here just to provide a brief update. You'll have following the substantial update you got through the annual report. Progress continues there, and we are making steady progress. As you can see, there's still a fair amount of work to do, but again, we've got a clear, substantial plan for this coming year, which is underway. For example, continuing to roll out safe care, introducing the standard operating procedures and so on. So there's a lot happening. And this report is here to provide moderate assurance against the plan based on the level of compliance at this time, but with clear plans to going forwards.
That's good, thank you. That's a helpful addition to what we received last time. Happy though if anybody has any comments or questions. No, okay, so we are being asked to note the content of the report and take moderate assurance. Assume that we're happy with that. Okay, lovely. And that takes us on then to item number 13. This is our workforce monitoring report. Gareth.
Thank you. Again, this is one of our reporting requirements. The board is required to publish a workforce monitoring report every year under the public sector equality duties associated with the Equality Act. A lot of information laid out. So thanks to Gail McCrae, our Equality, Diversity, Inclusion lead, and working with workforce colleagues, data colleagues to produce the information and put some analysis against it as well. So again, there's a wealth of information in there. and how we use it going forwards is important as well. It's one of the areas that is probably no different from other boards is there's a certain degree of historic data in our systems in relation to our employees who've been with us for some time, and that is often where the gaps sit with the data gaps in relation to recording protected characteristics. So that's something that is effectively been dealt with for people coming new to the organisation, but there's a little bit of a legacy issue that can be quite tricky to solve. And there are a few points in the document around areas we want to drill into in a bit more detail, understand a bit more. The gender pay gap, for example, in relation to medics is something that we will look into a bit more as well. So I'll stop there because, again, lots of information to digest and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Gareth. That's good. I found this really interesting actually to go through. I've got a question, but I'm happy to open up any questions or comments around the workforce monitoring report. No, this is maybe a slightly odd sort of question to ask, and I'm maybe coming at it from a different or a slightly unusual angle. I suppose I was interested when I was reading through it, and considering sort of protected characteristics and how we monitor the data around that. But I'm also interested, do we ever at all kind of cross-reference that with any HR issues around protected characteristics? So if anybody raises a concern or something around, you know, racism or sexism, for example, I mean, I'm assuming that we obviously do look at those figures through our HR processes, but I don't know if we ever do any kind of mapping across or kind of looking at the two things side by side.
No, is the short answer to that. I think I think one of the challenges would be is that the number of cases in terms of the ER and employee relations cases would be relatively small compared to this data set. So might be a challenge to, again, what we talk about in terms of with small numbers, then drawing a conclusion from that may be challenging. I suppose just to provide assurance that, you know, if there are issues in relation to race, for example, then that is something that we do pick up through the bullying and harassment policy implementation. So yeah, that's not sure if I can answer that any more fully.
No, and that's a fair point, and I recognise there's a bit of a numbers situation, and I absolutely get the point about sort of the sizes of the data set and what that would tell us. That's fine. It was just sort of something that popped into my head as I was reading through it. Okay, any other questions or comments about the workforce monitoring? Okay, so we are, oops, I've lost my place on the thing, being asked to note the content of the report and take substantial assurance that the publication demonstrates compliance with the public sector equality duty and specific duty Scotland requirement. Are we okay with that? Okie dokie, perfect. And that takes us on to item number 14. So this is the our Guide and Butte integration scheme review, and this is the approval of changes and consultation engagement strategy. And Gareth, please.
Thanks very much. This is here for approval today, based on the work of the Short Life Working Group, which came together between the council and the NHS board senior officers members to review in line with the legislation every 5 years. The scheme has to be reviewed, so that has been completed. There have been some changes incorporated into the document. No major changes to the integration scheme itself, but here for completeness in terms of oversight of the changes being made, and it will then go for further consultation, again in line with the legislation. So providing assurance that's being done collaboratively with council colleagues, and this will go to the council for approval at the same time. And if we're both organisations are content, it will then go out for further consultation in line with legislation.
That's great, Gareth. And that's how you know you've been sitting around the board table for a long time, when you can remember that this has been round a few times. But that's great. Time flies when you're reviewing schemes of integration. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this one?
I was just going to say, one comment I would make is that the legislation also, whilst it says has to be done every 5 years, it can also be reviewed at the request of either organisation at any point. So it's just to note that.
Yes. That's fine. I'm just checking. I can't see any hands up. So this is one of those items where we are agreeing. So we are being asked to take substantial assurance, agree that the revisions detailed within the updated integration scheme and summary revision document, agree that the arrangements for joint consultation exercise proceeds as set out within the report, and agree that if the consultation feedback suggests no further changes to the scheme and there is no opposition, that the 2 chief executive officers are authorised to approve. Are we content with that? Fantastic. Okay. And that takes us on to item number 15. And this is the update with regards to the single authority model. Gareth, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So the paper gives a lot of the background to the concept of what's been described as a single authority model, and the discussions to date in relation to progressing that within the Argyll and Bute Council area context. And the board has been asked to approve the establishment of a joint short life working group between the council and NHS Highland to progress an options appraisal for a single authority model, the associated work that will be required. So again, this has been driven under the public sector reform agenda led by Ivan McKee, Minister for Public Finance, and has potential for enhancing how we go forwards with delivering public sector services in these areas and improving outcomes for our populations. So again, a lot of information in the paper on the context and the background for this. The briefing paper gives you an idea of the proposals currently set out by colleagues in the council, for which we can then take forwards into joint discussions. And we also have the terms of reference, which will also be picked up by the joint short life working group. We'll need to discuss and agree that, building on what was the terms of reference for the short life working group the council had established prior to this. So I'll stop there. So there's obviously looking for approval today for that going forward with the joint short life working group.
Thank you, Gareth. Yeah, this is one of those papers where I suppose we are approving some sort of nuts and bolts bits of a process, but actually it's a paper that signals something really quite exciting. And I know we had a really good development session where we talked about this last week. So I don't know, I'll open up if people have comments and questions either about the sort of the formal ask or more broadly, if there's anything that people want to bring out. Karen.
Thanks, Sarah. And I guess sort of further reflection again and reading the papers in preparation for today. I suppose my question still is around the consultation with the public and members of our, you know, the people who actually are going to be living with this potentially new model, new approach, and knowing how interested our community in Argyll and Bute can be in matters such as this. The timing of that, I think, is you know, it's really important to get that right from the beginning. Otherwise, we set off on a a train of madness, I would suggest. And I think that's something that I just to understand how that will work and where that will sit with a kind of within prioritisation of the activity around this short life working group, I think is really key, and really key to get that message out early that this is not something that's going to be a done to, because planning with people will be raised as a document. And I guess the other thing is in relation to, again, and it's my understanding of this, I've not been around that long, so I'm still to kind of getting to grips with how some of this works. But from the perspective of this model, currently our staff are employed, many of our staff are employed as NHS workers and have probably been NHS workers for many, many years, and how that will or not, I don't really know the detail of what that would look like for the future, and is that a risk that we don't necessarily understand as yet, or I certainly don't. You know, so these are just it's questions. I think I've got a lot more questions at the minute than anything else, and you know, and that's where I think it'll be great to kind of understand this in more detail, as obviously our council colleagues have had more time to think about it from their perspective. So, yeah, very interesting, and you know, again, I think it's exciting, and part of that kilt making workshop, we've got another colour coming in. But yeah, as I say, these are my kind of two areas. What does it mean for the people that we employ currently, and how we're going to make sure that we do this in collaboration, where it's a collaboration and where it's in consultation and where it's in engagement, and all of those nice words that we use. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. I think that's a great question. I'll bring Elspeth in, and then I'll bring Gareth in.
Yeah, I think you've raised a very good point there, Karen, especially in relation to our staff. You know, that consultation engagement absolutely has to be all the way through this. They're also part of, you know, the communities as well. So I think we can't miss that out. And where, you know, I take assurance is that it's in the paper that we will be consulting with our staff. And I think from that trade union basis, and actually having been round the table when this all appeared the last time, hopefully we've learned lessons in actually how we do engage and take that forward on a collective basis.
Thanks, Elspeth. Absolutely. And Gareth, please.
Yeah, so I agree. The partnership working will be critical in this space if models that we are looking at or options for the models have an implication for workforce particularly, but I think it's good practice anyway to have partnership engagement around this. As you rightly identify, there's still quite a few questions for us to answer, and I think that is the work of the Short Life Working Group, is to explore that. There are options on the table. There may also be other options we haven't thought about. So I think we just need to kind of we need to make sure that we keep that in the back of our mind as to when we start to form a direction of travel and clarity on where we might share consensus between the two organisations on potential options, will be the time to start going into both those spaces for engagement with our workforce and also with the communities. I don't think we have that information at the moment to be able to give them clarity, and that will be the critical part of the relationship building and maintaining with the council, but also with communities. So it's definitely something that needs to be choreographed carefully and worked through together. The thing we'll need to be mindful of is the ministerial oversight of this and to the ambition, I think, in terms of pace. So that has been highlighted back through the ministerial meetings, but I think we need to make sure that we actively manage that as best we can, so that we are not getting ahead of ourselves in relation to what we can, making decisions. So it's going to have to be carefully framed and choreographed as we go forwards.
Thanks, Gareth. And I can see that Fiona wants to come in as well. So Fiona, you can add to that.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add a note of thanks to Gareth, who's been right up the middle of this work, which has been a whole new gamut of his working life in learning all about these arrangements, and I've appreciated his support in this. But just building on the questions that Karen and Elspeth that you've asked, I suppose for me, what we're needing to do is gather our questions of what matters to us as a health board and as a health organisation with responsibility for our population, because we need to take those questions with us, and I'm sure there'll be others that colleagues may want to share with us in the forthcoming days into that joint working group, because understandably elected members and council officers will come with a different set of questions of what matter to them, and it's by bringing those together, certainly in theory, and being really clear what our own set of questions are, that we'll find the best way forward. Now, of course, that will still then need wider conversations directly with staff and with the public. But I think that this step for me that we're seeking support of today is to come into a process, but within that, and I hope from the conversation that I sadly missed last week in the board development, that we're gathering the questions that really matter to us so that we can get them answered within that joint process. And that will then be the basis that we have the broader conversation with staff and with the public. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. And Garrett, I'll bring you in, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, do we have a very broad list of things what we're trying to achieve? I mean, what is this supposedly going to make better or easier? Or is it just financial?
So last week, we saw the first draft version of what's been described as a theory of change, which is articulating potential changes and potential benefits that would result from that, and they're split into short, medium, and longer term. It'd be fair to say that it's not purely financial, and I think it would be the key thing I would suggest we want to think about is outcomes for people, and that was agreed and has been echoed by the minister, is that we shouldn't be doing this unless it improves outcomes for people. That's the fundamental principle behind all of this. So that we will share with the Joint Short Life Working Group, and it's been led by Linda Bald, who I think is former Director of Public Health, I think. So she has been working with government to develop that theory of change, and we've agreed with the council colleagues to ask her if she would be willing to be involved in a future session with us, looking at how we evaluate options going forwards. So that's just to provide assurance there's a range of different outcomes we're seeking, but again, primarily driven by outcomes for our population.
Thanks, Gareth. And I think there's also, for those of you who haven't read yet, there are some helpful kind of documents and frameworks that sit around this from Scottish Government. So, obviously there was the programme for government which talks about this at a high level, and there is also the public sector reform. I can't remember if it's a framework or a document or it's a something, but it's a public sector reform thing from Scottish Government that's been published, and that sets out some of the principles as well. So, but I think back to Fiona's point, sort of in response, Garrett, is really, I think this is a really good opportunity for us as a board. I think I would pay tribute to the work that our local authority colleagues in Argyll Bute have put into this so far, and now that we have some really helpful parameters from Scottish Government that we can look through a lens at this, we can really consider, as Fiona said, from our perspective, knowing the things that we know, having the specialisms that we have, and looking at this through our lens, we can consider what are the opportunities, where is there a chance to improve outcomes for our communities in Argyll and Bute, and how might this be the vehicle to get us to that point? I think there's a lot of unknown at the moment, a lot of questions, and as Fiona said, I think now is a really good time for us to all start thinking of these questions, and then when we move forward with the governance around this, those questions can be taken in through that route. But I think it's, you know, it's exciting, and it's back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier on in terms of the population health. It's going to take us into a slightly new space, a bit of a maybe at times uncomfortable space, thinking about how we deliver services in the future, and that might be radically different, or it might just be a little bit different. We don't know yet, but I think this is going to require some strong leadership around this, and all the points around engagement that Karen made are really important as we move through this. But I think it's certainly an exciting opportunity to examine how we deliver services. And I think particularly for our most rural communities, there's something really quite tantalizing about the opportunities that might lie within this work. So I think I feel quite positive about it, and I know that we've got some great colleagues in Argyll and Bute who are going to be around this, taking us forward. Any other questions on single authority model at the moment? Obviously recognising we're right at the beginning of something here. There will be more updates in the future. Okay, so we are being asked to approve the establishment of a joint short life working group between Argyll and Bute Council and ourselves to progress the options appraisal for a single authority model and the associated work, and we are being offered substantial assurance at this point in that journey. Are people happy with that? Great, okay, fabulous. I'm going to move us forward then to item number 16. This is our Blueprint for Good Governance Improvement Plan, and this is an update to let us know where we're at with this. Nathan, I'd like to invite you in to speak to this, please.
Thanks. So the board approved its Blueprint Improvement Plan back in July 2023 and agreed that governance committees and the chairs group would provide informal oversight of the progress and delivery elements relevant to their functions at agreed intervals. So the outstanding actions that are overseen by the Highland Health and Social Care Committee and also the Audit Committee. So the outstanding ones for the Highland Health and Social Care Committee are noted within the report, but they specifically relate to the quality framework, which had been discussed at an EDG meeting in April 2025. A quality lead post would be required to support the next steps, and once funding was finalised, it would go out to advert alongside deputy medical directors, associate nurse directors and AHP leads being involved in moving things forward. The second action there centred around embedding care opinion. So that's ongoing, and the board's clinical governance manager is supporting that piece of work. And it was just worth noting that there were more than 250 instances of care opinion being used for NHS Highland services over the past 12 months, which I believe has been an increase on previous performance. The outstanding ones specifically for Audit Committee relate to risk appetite and management. And again, there's an update there in the report, but just briefly, it's around the board resetting risk appetite. So work was completed around that, and it'll undergo periodic review. Risk appetite was discussed in the March 2025 board development session, and work's underway to embed it into the high-level risk register and operational processes, including acute and health and social care partnership training. There's a bit around workforce upskilling, so ongoing risk management training across services. Acute services appointed a risk lead who is undergoing NHS providers training, and a 2025 risk workshop is planned. And also there's the in-phase rollout, which will be an opportunity to refresh risk systems. And risk is now a standing item of discussion at the Audit Committee. So I'll leave it there, and if there's any questions, happy to answer those.
That's great. Thank you, Nathan. Any comments or questions against the blueprint update? I suppose I just wanted to maybe make a note. So obviously, as with any kind of action plan or anything like that, it was a snapshot in time. So we'd obviously done a lot of work around the refreshed blueprint and the self-assessment, and the actions sort of captured here reflect that. I suppose what I wanted to pick up was the fact that the work that we are doing in the background around our governance is not restricted to this plan. So whilst we are moving forward the actions that Nathan has just taken us through and driving progress against that action plan, we don't restrict the work that we do around improving governance just to what's defined in this plan. And certainly I know that since Jerry has come in as vice chair with that fresh perspective, we've had conversations about what else we might want to do to make sure that our governance is right-sized, if you like. And again, I think, we've got a really big opportunity with Dominic joining the team and his experience and perspective. We've got another way to look at our governance and obviously continue to drive forward the actions that we've highlighted through the blueprint work, but actually think more broadly as well about what else we might want to do. Jerry, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Apologies. I should know the answer to this question. I think the last discussion we had about care opinion was it had a financial consequence to roll it out to our care settings. Did we ever reach resolution of that? One way or t'other?
I'm not sure if Louise or Boyd might be able to answer that one. I don't have the answer just now, Jerry, but if not, I can take it away.
Oh, I can say, well, Louise and Boyd both leapt in there. Go on, Louise, you're first on my screen, so you can come in first.
Boyd may have a different answer to me, I don't know, but certainly my understanding is there are aspects of health and care that would cost us money, and we haven't yet got a resolution to that. That's my understanding of it, but Boyd may have a better knowledge on that one.
I don't know because he did put his hand down. Yeah, I think you nailed it there, Louise, because Boyd didn't have anything to add. Okay, the other, yeah, sorry. So I think that was the point that I really wanted to make, which is about that continual work around governance. But I think that's really helpful to have this update against the blueprint. It's great actually, because I think as things move on, you forget where you've got to. So it's a helpful way to kind of look back and remind yourselves. Jerry, I'll bring you in again.
Apologies, Sarah. I just wanted to say I'm not fussed whether it's care opinion or something else. But if we are not going to or we are not able to utilise care opinion, do we not need to think about how we are going to collect that feedback from the care setting? We can't sit here and say we've got an action, say ensure feedback is consistently collected, and then know that we've got a whole section of our services where we're not collecting it or not able through care opinion. I appreciate there may well be other processes, and maybe just refining the action is all that's required to actually say we're utilising other mechanisms to collect that feedback. Thank you, Sarah.
Louise? Oh, and Boyd?
Thanks. Yeah, totally agree. I think we need to finally explore all of the options with care opinion and close that off one way or another as to whether we are able to expand. So that is still on our work in progress list. But I agree equally, one of the challenges we have is there's lots of services actually collecting feedback. And we only find out when we go and visit a service and they say, look at this, all this information. So there's something about using what we've already got and deciding how much of a level of consistency we want around that and how much we want service to have an opportunity for some level of individuality about how they collect data. So I totally agree we need to bottom this one out, and happy to take that as an action with Boyd.
Okay, yeah, no, good. I'll bring Boyd in as well, but we can actually, Nathan, if we can record that as an action, we can pick that up. Boyd?
Yeah, and I think just to echo, so it's not quite the same as Louise this time, so I kept my hand up. But one way of doing it probably isn't right either. So while we could definitely increase care opinion, I don't think we should put all eggs in one basket. Also, it's an example of, but not an exclusive example of using digital methods And my hand's up because we had one service that has used a QR code, which then activated a way of feedback, which were done through mobile phones. And so again, that's something that we can work out how to spread and share that. That might work for teams. The more this is held locally and driven locally, the better. But then the problem is, of course, here we are at a very high-level board meeting, looking to see what can we see. So as Louisa said, there are some things they're also variable, that it's not collected in a way that can be filtered up to this kind of meeting, but it is happening. However, what we would like to see is some assurance or understanding of more of the activity that is happening and what's being done to spread it where it is appropriate and spreadable so to do.
Okay, so I think then all the things that we've said might be applicable. So Jerry's point about potentially rewording the action to reflect, I guess, Boyd, what you've just described about different methodology in capturing feedback. But I think also, Louise, your point about just making, let's just bottom that out and make sure that actually we have we know what we know. And I think that's really good. And I suppose linking back, it's not just about capturing feedback for the sake of feedback. I think going back to earlier conversations in today's meeting around, different ways to measure things and ways of measuring impact and outcome, actually having some good tools in our toolkit as to how can we gather qualitative information and experience information is going to become, I think, increasingly helpful for us. So we can take some action to look at that in more detail. Thanks, Jerry. And Karen, please.
Thank you. I or others may regret me asking this, so I'm apologising now. So this report is about NHS Highland, and it references the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership, but there's no mention of Argyll and Bute. And even if they're not in this, is there, that I can see, but that might be just my reading of it, but is there an opportunity, even if it's not because it didn't come out of this report or whatever this assessment was, is there some cross Highland learning and peer-to-peer kind of stuff that we could be doing to make sure that we're in alignment or not, or if there are gaps in one or the other.
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes any sense, but it just feels like there's a part of the jigsaw puzzle that is probably somewhere else that I just don't know, but whether there's an opportunity out of it as much as anything else. Thank you.
No, I think it's a really good question. I can see Fiona and Gareth were going to come in. I was going to attempt to answer, but I'll bring Fiona and Gareth in first.
Well, I might regret putting my hand up. Your answer might have been better than mine, but I think if we track back to the history of the Blueprint for Good Governance, it was very much framed in an NHS context. And I remember when the chair from GG&C, that now I'm worried I won't remember his name, John Brown, I think.
Brown, yes.
That's I specifically asked the question when he came to present to the board of NHS Highland about why the blueprint didn't have a broader framing in terms of integration authorities. And he basically said that wasn't his brief. He'd been given a brief to do this in regard of the NHS. So I think this is one of those circumstances where the fact that the governance of the lead agency of adult services in Highland, or that, as we refer to, Highland HSCP, sits under the board, then it's become under the auspice of this piece of work, where it would usually have sat in an IJB space had it been in any other part of Scotland. So I don't think anybody is looking to exclude our integration authority arrangements, but technically they're not captured within the Blueprint of Good Governance. I think it's a legitimate question, Karen, for us to in the context of all the things we've been talking about today, look, I'm getting the kilt back out, to go back to government and say, how do we make sense of good governance by looking more broadly than just in our own silo? So I think that's a perfectly legitimate question. And in that framing of public sector reform, we're going to have to answer that question collectively about how we do that. But I think that's as good as I can give you in terms of explaining why this one looks the way it does. And it is that our integration arrangements in Highland are distinct, unique, and at times then look anomalous to the way that we're thinking about governance across Scotland.
No, that's great. Thank you, Fiona. And Gareth, I'll bring you in as well.
Yes, it's probably also worth noting this is based on a self-assessment which we piloted and were the first board to do. So we are awaiting, I suppose, an update as to where they go next with self-assessment. So in that context, it was done again the way that Fiona's referred to from a board lens perspective. And again, the IJB, I suppose, would have its own views on whether it would want to do something similar in terms of utilising a framework. But that, as say Fiona said, wasn't part of the briefing for the original blueprint.
Thanks, Gareth. And I suppose I'm reflective that actually taking absolutely the points that Fiona's made about the uniqueness of the lead agency model. I suppose if there were to be a similar exercise done within the IJB, it would be much more in that kind of partnership space because of the broad membership that is represented in the IJB, as it should be, and that might look and feel quite different, I guess, from what we've got in front of us, which is, as Fiona said, a kind of very NHS-y self-assessment process. But I think, again, just linking back to one of the conversations we had earlier, I think this is another good question when we are considering new models for the future, whether that be a discussion around population health and what good governance in that context looks like, or whether it be a conversation about single authority models and as you've said, Karen, is there learning that can be translated across in that context? So I think that these are some actually really helpful questions to ask ourselves. Fiona, I'll bring you back on.
Well, just in Evan's absence, I felt I should put my old hat on very briefly that there certainly was self-assessment work going on within Argyll and Bute IJB. Obviously, I wouldn't have been involved with that just over the last 12 months, but that kind of governance quality work was very actively being undertaken within the committee structure within the IJB. So although it doesn't replicate exactly the framework of the blueprint, that work certainly was very active. So I think that self-assessment methodology hopefully will remain well embedded in the IJB.
Thanks, Fiona. That was helpful. Okay, but yeah, I think it's a really great question, Karen, and I think absolutely if there's learning we can pick up and translate across, we should keep our eyes open for that and see how we do that. And indeed, it might be a question that yourself and other members take into the IJB about that kind of process and if there are learning opportunities. And of course, within the IJB, there's the opportunity to learn and pull information across from any governance work that our council colleagues will do as well. And so I think there's a kind of a broad spectrum of opportunities for learning to be pulled in there. Okay, I'm just going back there to my recommendations. So we're being asked to agree the revisions detailed. Oh no, hang on, am I looking at the right thing? Sorry, my notes have got a slightly wrong set of recommendations that I'm reading from, so give me just a quick second while I flip to another document. Sorry, we are being asked to take moderate assurance from the report. Note that informal oversight of progress delivery of the improvement plan continues to be undertaken by the chairs group and the governance committees, and note that 6 monthly updates are presented to the board. So I think we can do all of that if members are happy. Okay, and we now have item number 17. This is the revisions to the committee terms of reference. We've got 2 here. We've got the Highland Health and Social Care Committee, and I think we've got Area Clinical Forum as well. Nathan, I think this is your one.
Yeah, just a quick one. So, as it says in the report, it's just similar changes to both Highland Health and Social Care Committee and Area Clinical Forum to adjust the quorum requirement to account for current vacancies on the committee and forum, just ensuring it reflects the actual number of active members rather than enforcing an unrealistic quorum based on full membership. There had been some issues with Area Clinical Forum where some meetings had to be cancelled or rescheduled, so we were trying to avoid that wherever possible. Thankfully, that's not been the case for Highland Health and Social Care Committee, but we just wanted to make sure that was adjusted appropriately. So just looking for that to be approved, please.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Is everybody happy to approve those revisions and take substantial assurance? Lovely. And do we have any other competent business to raise before the close of the meeting? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. So the date and time of our next public board meeting is the 30th of September. Thank you everybody for your work today, and hope you have a lovely afternoon.
Good.
Thanks everyone.